This episode was co-produced by Holy Code, your go-to partner for all software development needs. From proof of concept to highly complex software, to building nearshore teams or delivering the optimal ERP solution, Holy Code is what you need. They're experts in startup development and have helped many of our former guests supercharge their technology and make the world a better place, one line of code at a time. So if you're looking for support with scaling your tech product, head over to holycode.com and get started today. That's holycode.com.
I think the trust is something as an individual, even more than as a company, because as an early startup founder, it's not the company they trust, it's you that they trust. You have to be extremely optimistic and you have to show a vision. You have to yourself then also live up to what you communicate.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Ansuya.
Well, welcome, Judith, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Ansuya.
So I'm quite excited to do this episode. I'm always very interested to talk to founders who are working on clean climate tech related solutions, and yours is a very interesting one. It's been around for a while, and let's just dive into it.
Yes, let's go ahead.
So Judith is the co-founder and COO at Urban Connect, a multimodal, sustainable mobility platform for companies offering an ecosystem of low-emission shared vehicles. Judith, you have a very interesting background with your family as well. Your father was the headmaster at a school in the countryside in Switzerland. Your mother, though housewife, she also studied teaching, and then you were as well teaching during your high school years at the summertime. But then you decided to study acting for 3 years. And then later, you did a bachelor's in economics. So this is a very unusual path, a very non-linear path. So walk us a bit like what motivated you to the decision of acting, first of all, and then switching to economics after that?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's indeed very unlinear. It always stressed me when I was a little bit younger because I thought you have to have this very clear and somewhat obvious path when you decide on your career. But looking back, it's actually been quite helpful to have different experiences. And yeah, my parents were both teachers, that's right. And I used to, even when I was a kid, I taught my brothers or my neighbor kids. As a teacher, I always liked to kind of bundle a couple of people and share insights and also kind of see how people are stronger in a field or learn something. And I think that kind of carried me also through doing substitute teaching during my high school, although I did it mainly for the money, to be honest. Yeah. It's very well paid. And when you're in high school, it's a really good salary per hour. But yeah, I really enjoy that. And what maybe the acting thing, what led me to that is I always danced ballet as a kid, and I really like to perform something in front of someone, being able to express with your body in front of a story, in front of an audience. I grew up without a television, so for me the cinema and movies was always not a forbidden fruit, but a very rare fruit. And I think that's what drove me very much towards acting. I always wanted to tell stories through movies, and also I maybe romanticized it a little bit. I was thinking that you have all those experiences that the people in the movies have, but it's not really the case. But that led me to studying acting right after high school.
Okay.
And soon after starting to study, I realized that this is not really the industry I want to be in. And also I wasn't the best actress around. There are so many very talented ones, and I like to do it, but I felt that was going to be way too competitive. And then I studied actually after studying acting, I went to the University of Zurich and studied economics because I really liked math since I was a kid. And I felt that's certainly something where I have a job afterwards, not with the acting where you never had a job. And also, I felt it helped me to understand the world better. And then during my studies, in economics, I co-founded the company already. And I think it was wasn't planned as well. I didn't start at university with the plan to found a company, but it kind of happened. And again, the university, like with the acting degree, I think the economics degree very much helped me during my path as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. And so what motivated you? Because this is, again, a new shift, right? Like in the middle of your studies during your bachelor's, 2013, you founded Urban Connect. So what was maybe a series of incidents or an incident, or what led you to say that, okay, I want to do a business of my own?
Well, when you look back, there was always a little bit of hints in my earlier years. I always like to sell stuff, for example, or improve stuff. Mm-hmm. And I always look at how things work and maybe how you can make it more efficient or organize it better. So that is something that has always motivated me. I've never been drawn to doing a job where I'm just fulfilling what has been defined before, and I'm doing it really well, but there's no innovative part around my work. So that's probably what already early on was something that I felt I'm drawn to. And then it was more coincidental than a plan. As I said before, it my co-founder now, and he's also my husband. At the time, he was my boyfriend. He worked at the big bank in Switzerland, and they had a shared e-bike fleet that they offered to their employees, but they managed it all manually. And again, employees loved it. It was a really cool offering, but it was very chaotically organized within the bank. And so it became really expensive to them. They stopped the pilot. And that's probably where we started to think wow, that's actually makes a lot of sense for clients or for companies to have that, but not organized in-house, but really outsource it. Yeah. And I mean, there were other stories, ideas going around in our heads, but then we really understood that the market potential is quite big for e-bikes for companies. And in the States, it was already a thing. Right. And we thought, let's give it a shot. And for me, it was certainly more interesting than doing an internship in a big corporate where you do something small on the big wheel of the company. I was well, in a startup, you learn a lot fast. So let's take that risk. And then at the beginning, it was more, for my husband, it was a side project next to his actual job. And I had it as a side project next to my studies, although I put quite some energy in it. But for the first couple of years, it was more like a project thing. We had kids in the meantime. But then our first client was Google already very early on in 2014. And they came to us in 2017, 18, and they said, look, we really like your service. We love working with you, but you have to become more intelligent. There was no software to our bikes. And that's the moment where we said, okay, if we do a software, we have to do an investment. We cannot just keep it as a side project. And so 2018 is really where we decided to go say let's pull all the horse or all the bet on that company. And that's when I also had finished already my studies. Our kids were a bit older, and then we gave full gas. Wow,
so that's a lot to unpack here. I mean, firstly, I would like to comment that I think having a lot of that creativity that you brought in with your dance and acting, as well as the analytical mind from the economics and math, really kind of played in well together, it seems, because Urban Connect is doing so well. So let's go back to talking about your husband, who is also the co-founder, Robert Rootman. Mm-hmm. So how did this idea come? It was, as you mentioned, from his workplace, right? That they were seeing this problem.
Exactly. That's where we saw the problem. Yeah. And we were privately involved. It was not I wasn't looking for a co-founder or something like that. Right. It was more we co-founded because we both really thought that's an exciting idea and an exciting also opportunity to test something. We didn't have kids at the time, so we were also quite open for risk. I mean, we're still rather open for risks, right. But I think at the time we really didn't have much to lose as well. Okay. So, we both saw the market potential as well. We realized, I think we saw a study at the time, it was 2013. Yeah. No, it wasn't for Zurich, it was a global study. By 2020, 80% of people on Earth will be living in cities, in urban areas. And we were well, if they cannot all travel by cars. They cannot, especially not to work in the mornings and the evenings. And we had those e-bike, or my husband had this e-bike from Credit Suisse at the time. And so we were well, it just makes so much sense. Mm-hmm. And why is no one doing this? And we looked at existing models in the States. similar models of what we did at the time. And it really felt like, well, there's such a big opportunity. Let's just give it a shot. And yeah, that's how we started.
And how did you guys juggle this in terms of like when we have guests here who are both privately partners as well as working together? How do you kind of separate work life and personal life? Because maybe it just overlaps also
it does
home.
overlap, yeah. And on LinkedIn, people say how fantastic everything is and how everything is. I've once been at the conference where there was also a couple and they were like, just like, they don't like anything more than waking up with one another and looking into their eyes and then going into their, like, being full energy for their venture. And I mean, it's not as romantic with us. Like, it's much more messy. Okay. And what we learned is, like, I think it's really good to have a common vision, both for the family or like as a couple, but also for the company, if you kind of know why you're doing it and where you're going, because then you have much more like alignment within the company, but also the relationship. I think the kids helped us quite a bit to just also be able to turn off the work part. Yeah. Because when you're with the kids, there's not much room in your brain that can also think about work. So we also learned over time, look, when we're with the kids, which is in the mornings and in the evenings before they sleep, and at weekends, we try not to talk about work.
And they need your full undivided attention.
Yeah. And we wanted the kids, like I really enjoyed spending time with them and being like how do you say in English? It's like silly. Like I don't want to be professional with them, and so we're very like private with them. It's like we're a family and we're not a business during this time where we're with the kids, and I think that really helped us. Although it's still not perfect, of course, there are calls on the weekend sometimes, but I think that helped us to structure it very clearly into private and work. And
you mentioned you have three kids,
we have
right?
3 kids,
so that is also another big thing for you to handle. So how do you and your husband manage that, having 3 children and this big business?
Yeah, I think that could maybe be helpful for other entrepreneurs, especially women. I think for them it's more of a topic that they think about even before they have kids. And I think if you're open to, like, there's this African proverb that it needs a village to raise a kind. If you're open to share your kid to some degree with that village, I think there are certainly ways. Like if you want to be, like my mom was, as you said, was a stay-at-home mom. If I would take her as my role model, that's how the kind of mother I want to be, I could only fail. But I also made the conscious decision to say, look, I actually want to also build something on the side and still be a good mom. But I very early on took help from outside. Like when there was babies, we put them to daycare. Not 100% of the time, but quite often. I had a lot of friends without babies at the time, so a lot of my friends and also my brothers, actually, and my grandma, they came over to our place, had sleepovers sometimes where they really took care of the family and of the kids as well.
That is so generous.
We were like, that's also like, I think you can do the best that you can, but also in our case, there was so much luck supporting, like the fact that my grandma was still fit enough, the fact that my mom came to support so often, also the fact that our kids were sick almost never. Wow. Like they're very like, we let them play in the mud enough maybe, so they had a good immune system.
You really need to do that as well, and not overprotect.
Exactly, and they were just used from a early age that there are other people that we trust. Like I think whenever they feel we trust the people, they trust the people quite a bit as well. And so we were like early on getting them used to also be with others. But also we were with them quite often. If I now compare with my friends that have kids now and they have a full-time job in a corporate, I do think sometimes we have more time with our kids actually, because we can also, by now with the company being bigger, we can prioritize, or like we can plan our schedule around their schedule more than maybe you're able to when you're in a corporate.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, great role model then, not just from a founder perspective, but also on how you're managing a family life. So thanks for sharing. So these days, Robert is the CEO. And since your Series A round last year, so congratulations on that. And we'll talk about that more later. Up until then, you were the CEO. So it's been nearly like a decade. So what prompted this change? And if you could explain a bit, like what are the roles and responsibilities for each of you?
Yeah, I mean, the change was mostly prompted by us during the Series A actually looking at our responsibilities, because we kind of grew into doing certain things in our everyday life. Robert only joined Urban Connect 2020 full time.
Okay.
He started in sales mainly, but as a founder, of course, he was very much involved with investors, very much with partnerships. And because I was like, I know the company from when I was alone and from having the first interns and like basically I know every part of the company quite well. And so it was like a natural development that I was like very much responsible for the company and making sure it is run well, making sure all the processes work fine and knowing what's going on everywhere. And Robert more had this like a little bit more towards external stakeholders like sales, but also investors. And it was more kind of like we looked at what we are actually doing and we thought like, actually, it's more like he's doing this CEO, like the classical CEO task, and I'm more involved in this like general management tasks.
Right.
And that's why we then said like, let's just put a name to the reality. At the same time, I think I still do, like doing this podcast now, I still do quite a bit of founder stuff, not just COO things.
Right.
And Robert also is still very much involved in everyday processes. We are also only 30 people. It's not like we're like the CEO is only in board meetings, right?
I mean, it's basically you share responsibilities, but then you have clearly, you know, that this person is doing that and you're doing that. So the titles are pretty much a little bit fuzzy.
It also helps towards outside more than, and I think we both as founders, you feel extremely responsible for the company and for the people in the company and for the stakeholders outside. But I think it helps towards outside and also for us to say, look, that's still we like to work with ownership and that people know what they have ownership for and what they probably also have the final say on. And so I think it helps with this splitting of responsibilities.
Okay. So tell us a little bit like how you think the solution that you have of corporate mobility is helping out in the whole climate situation problem. So if you can explain a little bit how that contributes.
Well, I mean, first of all, what is certainly important to say, it's not the only solution when it comes to climate change. But if you look at the emissions being generated on a global scale, but even if you break it down into the Swiss market, 30% or a third of all emissions come from auto traffic. And so I do think like looking at mobility is worth it. And I really like, I keep saying that in such settings, but I think the climate change is the challenge of our generations. And like you should be smart in where to look at where you have the biggest leverage. So for me, I think mobility, you have just such a big leverage. Then if you look at the amount or like what is super, like in the past, funding went mostly into B2C companies. But when you actually look at commuting and business travel, it's a big chunk of global travel is somewhat connected with work. Like either it's a company travel, but it's also going to work, like commuting to work or from work. And so that's, basically where we're like, look, we have a huge leverage here. So we don't have to, like as a B2C company, you have to convince each single person to go with your mobility. We have like a big task to convince a company, but then it's offered within the company to thousands of employees and it's subsidized. So it's cheaper for the individuals and we can make like with a little bit like, it takes longer at the beginning, but then once you're in companies, you have such a leverage. And so I think that's why at the beginning, we thought it's a niche, but actually it has quite a big leverage and potential. And that's, I hope it answers your question, but that's how we ended up in this.
Okay. And if you can explain a bit more concretely what Urban Connect offers to the companies. So in terms of the solution and the platform, as well as the different types of vehicle optimization. Yeah.
So it's we started off with e-bikes, what I said, but by now we offer a multimodal platform to companies. We have at the heart of our service is a software that we developed ourselves. It's a front end app towards the users, but also to our mechanic or like operational partners. And then there's a back end towards the client company. And what we offer is not only e-bikes, but a platform of different vehicles that we also provide. Like we also put the vehicles then to the company. So if we have a fleet of e-bikes and e-cars, the client like says how much at what location, and we actually install the charging infrastructure. We put the vehicles there. So we pre-finance it. We lease it. Like it's a leasing.
Okay.
We insure it, we brand it, we make the whole communication around the launch event. Like we plan, like it's a really
it's
holistic
like a whole
solution.
A to Z
Exactly.
solution. So okay.
Exactly. But then also, and by now, like in April now, we're launching also public transport. So we have an integration from it's basically, you can buy an SBB ticket. We are launching right now the public transport with the mobility budget. And in summer, there's also a virtual card where you can then basically pay for an Uber or a taxi or a Lime. So any mobility that is around, you can subsidize as an employer to your employee. And so it's a really holistic solution, but not just software. It also brings the asset and the infrastructure around the mobility that the companies need.
Okay. Wow, that's really covering a whole suite of options. And in terms of like optimizing the existing fleet, so you mentioned that you are leasing them. Who do you lease them from, and how do you try to leverage what is already existing?
Yeah, the optimization is another offer. It's like we have this classical fleet offer that I was just explaining now with micromobility and cars and then public transport. But we also offer a service before we even put our service there, where we analyze the existing fleet of a client. Very often they have very big fleets of corporate cars, be that pool cars, but also like service cars, for example. And what we offer is we put trackers within all the cars. We don't know who is driving. We just know where each car is. And we analyze the fleet for usually 3 to 6 months. And based on their data, not just some kind of average Swiss data, but actually your company fleet is behaving this in this way. And based on that data, we were able, in the last couple of cases, we were able to reduce the fleet by 30 to 50%, which is a massive, it's a massive
optimization.
We can reduce the fleet. With that, we can reduce parking. We can reduce the fleet cost, like the actual asset costs, but also emissions. And we do that by making it shareable. And then also, with time, we electrify the fleet. We don't always want to electrify immediately if the fleet is rather new and it is with petrol. That's fine. And then when we replace, like when the fleet has to be replaced, we suggest, of course, more sustainable vehicles such as e-cars, but then also e-bikes, because I think the number 60% of commutes or like of trips done are below 8 kilometers. So very often a car trip done could be done with a bike or a cargo bike.
Right. And do you also work with car rental or bike rental companies, or because you have to brand it, you don't do it?
No, we have our own fleets that we put to clients. But with the virtual card that we're launching in summer, we will be able, or like our users will be able to also pay for publicly shared bikes or also mobility cars or other car sharers.
Okay. And you mentioned collaboration on public transportation as well. So is this in a way like a subsidized offering for the employees?
Yes, if the employers give them a mobility budget, which is basically right now many companies give the employees with their salary some kind of mobility cash component. Like usually it's like 40 francs. It's usually up to 600 a year because it's tax free. But more and more companies, they say, like, well, if I pay the 40 francs as part of the salary, they can just as well pay a pizza with it, right? So, and they want to be able to track how employees move. And therefore, they start to give them a mobility budget, which is, again, 40 francs as an amount, as a voucher. And we then offer them the opportunity to spend it. So they would load up 40 francs on our backend to the different employees, and the employee then has the choice to spend it on public transport or on a shared car or on a shared offering via the virtual card, and in that or into parking spots. So you subsidize different modes.
Okay. And so when you mentioned that they want to track how the employees are moving, so what exactly are they analyzing and tracking with that information?
It depends on the client. First of all, more and more clients. In Switzerland, the pressure is not as high as in Germany, but they have to report on the tier 3 emissions of the company, which also includes the community of the employees. Okay. So, like in the past, companies had to report on financial data. They now also have to report on emission data and mobility. Like especially in service-driven companies, the employee mobility is a big it has a big impact on emissions, and so that's a way of measuring how employees move. On the other hand, many clients, they have issues with parking spots. So they want to understand, look, the guys who come and really need the parking spot or say they really need the parking spots, how far do they actually have to commute home? Would there be a more sustainable but also more user-friendly route by maybe public transport plus an e-bike for the last mile? I think there is many ways, like many information in that data where companies then see a potential to optimize, either from emission perspective or cost perspective.
Wow. And have you been able to also gather or measure like how that has affected employee well-being? So also from the productivity standpoint, and you already mentioned the impact it has in terms of the climate.
Yeah, we are measuring that. I wouldn't feel comfortable to make like some like I have done econometrics in school, so I always feel a little bit like hesitant to I can talk about examples. So we have just made a survey at one of our big clients, Lonza in Visp. It's in the mountains. They have 3,000 users out of 5,000 employees, so quite a bit of employees use our service, and we did quite a lot of surveys over the last 1.5 years or almost 2 years that we work with them. And for example, one of the numbers that makes us really proud is that 68% of the employees say that our offering has changed their mobility behavior in a positive way. That mean, and then we have split it up. I don't have the numbers in my head, but I think something like 30 to 50% is actually, they do commute more sustainable, like less with the car. I think private car usage has dropped by 27%. From like where they were to where they are now. But then there is also feedback, like it can also behave this 68% of having changed your mobility behavior in a positive way can also be more in the fresh air.
Yeah.
Or I can leave home later and still get to work in time because I have an e-bike. I don't have to wait for a bus in between two connections. There's many like
no headache to park and things like that.
Yeah. So, but I would and we do see like a reduction of emissions if we compare with them. But it's always tricky I'm a little bit suspicious with those data that says like before I always traveled like this and now I travel like that, because people are not always 100% honest with their answers. Of course, yeah. But of course, we have made those surveys, and it is indeed like it shows that employees commute much more sustainably and that companies are saving emissions. But I think the hard facts is when you look at their existing fleet and you look at their fleet after we have introduced our service.
And in terms of presence, you mentioned Switzerland and Germany. Are there also other countries where you are at the moment?
Liechtenstein. Okay. It's not really Switzerland, but it's also actually Switzerland a little bit, yeah. So we have quite a few clients, like Hilti is one of our biggest clients, and they're in Schaan in Liechtenstein.
And in terms of behavior of employees utilizing your service, do you see difference in that amongst these three marketplaces?
We're at the very start in Germany, and we basically have one big client, Roche, that we work in Switzerland at 2 locations that we also work in Germany with. So the Roche employees behave quite similar in Germany, like be it in Grenzach or Basel, it's like 3 kilometers apart. So I think the behavior is pretty similar. In Liechtenstein, I mean, what we see there is like they don't have a fantastic public transport offering. They have a bus, they don't have a train. There's Liechtenstein has this very special restriction that only people who are from Liechtenstein or who are in the board of a company or in the executive team of a company can live in Liechtenstein. So there's an extreme amount of commuters in and out in the morning. And there we see people want to drive the bike because they're faster than the car. If they want to get to Hilti, like Schaan, for example, they're faster than standing in the line with the car. Otherwise, I wouldn't say we see a lot of difference in between companies. Like, again, I wouldn't say like this is an empirical insight, but I feel like you can see quite a bit about the corporate culture by the way they behave on our app.
Could you give me an example of that?
Or like, I mean, it's interpretation in the end. It's like, but what I think what we can see is that some clients, like some users, they just never return it dirty. Like there's companies of ours, I think Hilti is a good example. It's always like they keep that it's a family owned business. I kind of feel that they're like, they know one another, although it's a big company. They have this feeling of the next user could be my colleague. Therefore, I return it really well. And compared to B2C, all our fleet is being treated really well. Like we never have like, no one smokes in a car or nobody leaves their McDonald's stuff in the car, like what happens in B2C offerings for cars. But you can still see like the way people maybe come late without really, like they return it a half an hour late, they pay for it, but they don't really think for the next users. And then there are other clients where you really feel like they call you, like they call our hotline, they're like, I'm really sorry, I'm in traffic, I'm half an hour late. And we're like, we have those 3-hour buffers, so it's no problem, but you can see that they really care about the next users.
Very interesting insights. So do you think we're driving towards a future where there would be no individual ownership of vehicles, especially, I think, Switzerland?
I think especially urban areas, yeah. I do think we are moving away from ownership more to access. Well, we're not promoting that nobody should have an ownership. If somebody like is disabled or for private reasons really needs a car, like they should have a car, but they shouldn't be stuck in traffic. So we believe that the future is more like access-based, but also more multimodal, because by only having access to the different modes, we believe people will do smarter decisions. They will not take the car if it's faster or cheaper with the public transport or with the bike. And therefore, we hope that actually less people will be traveling with cars because they will find other ways, other modes of transport that are more sustainable and actually bring them a better user experience than being stuck in traffic. And the question is really like, I believe this people or like these entities that will offer mobility, this access to mobility will be players such as SBB or Uber, but we really believe that those platforms could also be within the companies. They have a massive leverage with all their employees, like a company like Roche has over 10,000 employees in Switzerland alone. If they are the orchestrator of this mobility, they can be very powerful. And so we put our bet on this idea.
Okay. So in terms of when we look at all the companies, right, that are out there, many of them are not providing the employee transportation solutions, probably because they don't have the budget for it. And the ones that do, they're often provided probably for their C-level employees. So do you think that there is a way that you can also reach out to that part of the population?
Yes, we believe that, especially because we think that companies actually already subsidize mobility quite a bit, but they don't measure it as much. So a company like Lonza, I mentioned them before, in Visp, they give free parking space. That's a way of subsidizing private car use because they don't have limited space in Visp, in where they're based. And they decided to give part of that space for free to the employees with a car. This is a way they already are paid. Like they could be using that space for another production facility.
Right.
Many clients or like many companies give them Reka checks, for example. Like they give them money to access public transport, or they give them this like budget every month, but just as a cash component. Or they give them company cars, not just to the executive team. There are many sales teams, but like even if they work 50%, they have their own car. And so I think many don't really understand how much they are already spending on mobility for their employees. And so, yeah, we feel more like the companies have to understand how much they're already spending, taking this full cost approach, not just like, but we are not paying them bikes right now, but really understanding how much they're spending already, what they're also missing on in terms of possibilities and saving space, saving cost. And then I think the potential is quite big.
All right. And nowadays you work with, a number of household names like Google, WHO, the World Health Organization, ETH, Roche, IKEA, etc. But obviously there was once upon a time where you had to, start with your first customer. So the first customer, as you explained how it began, but what was the challenge like after that for finding more customers and finding the right clients?
I think the challenge, our first client was Google. It was a bit of a challenge to get them because, we originally wrote to, I think, hundreds, probably 300-400 companies until Google was one of them. And they said, yes, we want to give it a shot. And and then we grew quite a lot with Google, and we didn't have the need for another company because, as I said, it was a side project. We didn't have a software. It didn't have to scale. But the moment we then developed the software, we had to go find, we wanted to go and find more clients. And there, I think our challenge was a little bit that companies would say, well, we are not Google. That was a lot of the feedback we got, nice that Google can afford this, or nice that Google thinks like this, but we don't think we have to offer bikes to our employees. And I think that was a little bit of a challenge that we started to kind of move the focus from the clients, from this thinking of this being a fringe benefit, but really understanding that Google doesn't do it as a fringe benefit, but the employees save time in between the different campuses. They don't have to offer any parking spots at Europa to their employees. There's a lot of cost component. And I think that was a shift of communication that we had to do.
And so when you approached Google, you did not have any software then.
No.
So how did you go about it?
To build the software.
Also to sell them the solution.
Well, yeah, we knew they have bikes in America, and they actually didn't even have locks on the bikes at the time in the States. So at the beginning, we didn't have to have a software to sell to them. With time, after the moment where they said we're getting so big that it needs a software just to make it more easy to handle, that's when we decided to take it serious and take on some money and build software. What we did as a mistake at the time, and I think that was a big learning for us, and certainly could help some entrepreneurs out there. What we did is we kind of had one friend that was in software, and we asked him to build our app. And we didn't know, we weren't into tech enough that we understood that the software developer is not a software developer, right?
Yeah.
So he was a guy building fantastic backends, but he has never developed an app.
Yeah.
And so we promised at the time Google, and we already had another company, Avalok, which is also a software company here in Zurich. As a client, we told them all 1st of May, or I think 4th of May, 2018, I think it was, our software is ready, our app is ready. And then we let the guy go and told him what we need. And we expected, I think we had a meeting end of April where he showed us the app. And so in end of April, we met him, and he was like, well, sorry, guys, the guy that I asked to do the software or the app, he built a great backend, but he was like, the guy that I asked to do the app, he lied. There's no app. And so that was the moment where we were like, And then we had to go to both clients and say we have an app. There was an app, but it was such a bad app. I'm not from tech, but I could see this is really, really bad. And then what we did, and I think that's really also kind of an entrepreneurial moment where you there was many things in me saying let's just drop this company. We didn't know what to do, but then we kind of took a moment to think. We also went to Google and said, look, this is what happened. We're very sorry. It's our our being naive that led us there. We didn't have bad intent, but this is the situation. How do we solve it? We have this and this options. We also understand if we say we're done here.
Yeah.
And then actually we chose a partner. At the time it was a software development company here in Zurich. We intentionally took Zurich, although it was expensive, but so that we could, in an agile way, develop the software. We would sit with them every week, every 3 weeks. I think we showed the development to Google. They could give us feedback, which was really, again, good for the development because it wasn't just developing something into the blue and then it's not what the client wants. And I think with this process, first of all, we kept the trust of the client that something is coming, and we're not just saying again, in 5 months there will be an app. And the client felt very much as part of the product. I think they felt it's also their app.
Right.
And I think that was a very, for the family, it wasn't a good time. It was this summer, I cannot remember, when I look at pictures,
stress.
I cannot remember this time from a private perspective. So we were really in stress mode for a couple of months. But then when we launched and it worked, it was and then we learned so much in that process about how to develop software, how to communicate about, or how to manage expectations towards the client and all of that. But that's how we went along.
So would you say that the transparency that you showed to your clients also helped to build trust? Because I feel like a lot of times founders can go to sell something that is not quite there and could potentially break the trust that they have with the customer.
Look, it's a very fine line for me. I think the trust is something as an individual, even more than as a company, because as an early startup founder, it's not the company they trust, it's you that they trust. And I think you have to be extremely optimistic and you have to show a vision and you have to win their trust in the same vision without saying, like, you cannot say it's already there if it's not there. I think that's the line where you shouldn't go.
Yes.
But you, like, I think also if you say, like, if everything goes according to plan, then you also lose the trust, because then they're like, well, she cannot really do it. So you have to be very confident. But I think it starts with yourself actually believing in the vision, but then also in your plan. And then also just be very...
show them that you can do it, basically.
Show them that you can do it, but also I think it's being very disciplined, and also you have to yourself then also live up to what you communicate. And for me, it's very helpful. So if I say now in this podcast, we have a virtual card in summer, like I really want to have the virtual card in summer because I said it, and it's somewhat my own, I feel like it's almost my name to this statement. Right. And if maybe something goes wrong or we change strategy, but I try to always communicate with clients, especially in a way where I can go have coffee with them anytime and look them in the eyes, because otherwise it's not worth, having a startup is stressful. And if then you also cannot sleep well because you feel like you're a little bit of a fraud, I wouldn't.
It's upholding your integrity, basically,
yeah, exactly.
with the clients. Yeah.
And also I think also as a company, like employees notice that, like they see, okay, I think if they wouldn't, I would feel very bad, or like it would drain my energy if I would feel like people listen to me, they nod, but they don't believe. And like even more in the company, and the bigger you get, the more you have to have this integrity. And otherwise it wouldn't be for me, at least. It would be very tough on me.
Yeah. And do you in today's time have a CTO now, or do you still outsource it?
No, we have everything. Let's put it like that. We moved from this company in Switzerland to a nearshore company in Serbia. And this became a little bit tricky because of basically there is certain restrictions with overhead costs, right. and we wanted to insource certain guys, and this was just tricky. So we now, over the last, we stopped with this nearshoring company in January, and now we have everything in-house, but not everything in Switzerland. And we have a CTO.
Okay.
Very nice guy from Russia originally, and he just relocated to Switzerland.
Okay.
And he worked at Get before, which is somewhat a global competitor from Israel.
All right. So let's also talk about how the pandemic affected you, because, people were staying at home and they didn't need any mobility solutions at that time. So how did you guys manage that period?
It was probably the even tougher time than when we had an app that always crashed. So I think there was probably a couple of weeks where we kind of froze, because we were like, well, no one needs our solution. Like, let's be honest with ourselves. This is not going to be needed in the next month. And so we quickly agreed that this time will be over. We assumed people will want to go back to the office. But the question was more how do we survive this time until people actually go back to the office? And we decided not to do Kurzarbeit, like this time where you just get paid from the government, but stay at home. Also, I feel like we had way too much talent in the team for that. We didn't want people to be at home, although they had such great ideas and such drive. And so we actually decided to do a seed round in this year. Also to have a little bit of runway, because we didn't know how long this will take. That was one thing. But then also we thought we talked very intensively with our clients and said, what do you need when it comes to mobility? And what we learned at the time, we only had e-bikes for companies. And we realized that they would really appreciate to have one platform for everything. So that then in 2020, we developed the e-scooter integration, e-car integration. And this was basically, that's how we then developed the system in a way so that in 2021, in April, we started to launch clients again. And it was multimodal clients with cars, with scooters. And we kind of we always said, and I mean, we're still, sometimes I feel like we're still somewhat in a crisis because I feel like every year something new came. But we always said, like, let's get out of the crisis where we're like, thank God this happened. Not to the society, but like, thank God to Urban Connect, we had this like moment where we had to just take a step back and look at the forest and not just be in the forest and be like, okay, what should we actually do now that we have this opportunity where we can breathe? And I feel like we actually succeeded in that. I think we're stronger now because of this moment that we had where we had to take a step back.
Great. So you had the seed round in 2020 with family and friends, and then Series A in 2022 with Helvetia Venture Fund and SPS, which is Swiss Prime Site Solutions, totaling now to about 5 million francs raised. So what were the challenges you faced first when you were fundraising during the seed round?
Yeah, so we fundraised in 2020, which was a very difficult year to fundraise, especially if you were selling B2B mobility and nobody was in the office. So and also I think one of the feedbacks we always got from VCs was that we were not asset light. They always wanted to invest in asset light, so software only. And we clearly saw that the clients don't want asset light because they want somebody to manage the fleet and somebody to put the fleet there. So we knew like we can become asset light, but then the sales would drop, like it won't work. And thank God we had loans for the fleets in the past from families and friends and kind of like smaller strategic partners of Urban Connect. And they could see over the time since 2014, really, how we just had these recurring cash flows, like the loans were always paid back in time. Every fleet in itself was very profitable. So they understood the business well enough, and they also knew the team well enough that they knew like we will survive this time. And when people go back to the office, this can fly and this works. And so these were the friends. I mean, it's not my family or something. It's like more kind of like, friends, families and fools. Is that what you call it? And I think that was the biggest obstacle. COVID, people not being interested in the field at the time, and then being asset heavy, when investors really looked into asset light models.
And then during the Series A round, what were the challenges you faced then? Which was also, I mean, we were hitting an economic recession, the war and all of that happening last year. So
yeah, apart from that, I think for us as founders, what was quite tough in that round is that we were actually, in 2020, it was quiet. We didn't have operationally much going on. In 2022, I think we more than doubled sales. So actually, operationally, the business was running and the business was busy, and we did it on the side. I think that was the thing that was sometimes like the most stressful part about it, that I actually felt like we have to make sure the clients are happy, the business is running, but also we are raising cash. So that was probably, I mean, and then you always have those things. I think every founder thinks like, well, I'm going to raise in 3 months, and then it's never 3 months, then it's 9 months. And you're stressed the whole 9 months. So that, of course, like we took longer until we actually had the signature and all of that. But I think that's, by now when I speak with other founders, it's just a normal thing. You plan something and it always goes a little bit longer and a little bit other than expected.
Your clients, are your biggest champions. So how have they influenced your product development as well as new customer acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, the Google example is a really good example when how we developed the software. I think, like, first of all, I really think they are our biggest supporters. I think in the prep call, you asked me about, like, who are your biggest supporters? And I think it's the clients, because they don't just support us on the sideline. They use our service. They give us feedback. They told us every 3 weeks how we should develop the app so that it fits better to their corporate needs, and we could replicate that for others. And it continues to be so, not just with Google, with any clients. If they have new ideas, we try to really listen, and we pilot stuff with them. We have test trial groups within companies that are more like MVP tolerant. So that's certainly very helpful. And then the other thing is, of course, the recommendation factor. Like we are very proud that like any new client that we are acquiring, they can basically go to our website and go through the logos and say, like, I want to speak with the mobility manager of IKEA, or I want to speak with the one of Roche. And we can make the connection and feel comfortable that they will actually say good things about us. not always perfect, of course, but we have built partnerships so that they also, with a good consciousness, can really recommend our service.
So now, you have a team of, you mentioned 30 people. You have 35,000 plus registered users and approximately 1,000 fleet vehicles under your management. So the future is looking bright. What's next for Urban Connect?
So the next steps, like we're growing again, like our goal is again more than doubling ARR. This year we're well on track. So having more company clients is the focus right now within Switzerland because the potential is still quite big. We are launching now the public transport integration, including this mobility budget. We have some exciting partnerships in the oven, but we cannot talk about them now. But I think, the stuff that is on our plate right now makes us all very excited about what the future brings.
Yeah. Very cool. And what about you, Judith, as an individual? What is next for you?
I think what my focus is at the moment is trying to find my strength. I'm doing so many different things, and I feel like I should focus more and really understand how I can bring value best to the company. I know I can do many things, but maybe I shouldn't be doing all the different things, but really also try to let go and give it to people where I feel like they can actually do it much better than I can. And by them doing that, I can focus more on other things. So that's for me.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing all of this. We would like to also hear from you some recommendations, resources, books, podcasts, whatever, or gadgets that you feel could be helpful for our listeners.
Yes. So let's start with books. My all-time favorite book as an entrepreneur is The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. I don't know if you know it, but I've read it, I think, 3 times. And each time I'm like, that's perfect for now. And then that's perfect for now. And it's such a good book.
Yes.
And also so honest. And because I really feel in this LinkedIn world of people always being perfect entrepreneurs, perfect career makers. And the reality is never like that for you individually. It's very soothing to read a book like that and say like, it's actually normal that it's tough. That's one of my, it's my all-time favorite. And I recently read Naval Ravikant. I don't know if you know him. Yeah. He didn't write the book. Another guy kind of made a collection of his tweets and summarized some of his interviews. And it was very much around building wealth. I don't agree with him everywhere there, but the focus is really much how to build wealth and stay happy along the way. And I think the stay happy along the way part is really strong and much more important than the wealth part, because if you're unhappy and wealthy, I don't think or it's not my goal at least. So that one I really enjoyed. And then what I usually like to do is instead of just watching just a series because I'm tired at night, I try to, or like I really enjoy watching, for example, Masterclass. And then I like to we watched the one about negotiation. I really like to just get inspired also about something completely different, like just to get a different perspective.
For sure.
So maybe that's like on the impulse. Otherwise, tricks and stuff, I think it's really important that you take care of your health, both on your physical health. So like try to move a lot, sweat every now and then, find a way to compensate the stress, but also the mental health. I think that's something that should be talked about a bit more in the entrepreneurial sphere, because I feel like when you seek help or when you need a break, it's seen as a weakness. It's very much promoted as like you shouldn't do that. You should be 24/7 working on your company, but you cannot do that for. I mean, Elon Musk can do it, but I don't think most people can do that over 10 years without.
I think founders often get sucked into this overdrive that they have to do it and create it, and the passion is a good thing to have, but not at the expense of your own health and well-being, which is oftentimes the case with burnout and stress.
I was on a plane lately and I watched this super pumped about the Uber founder, Travis. I don't TJ. They call him in the Uber founder, you know, and he has as a mentor Arianna Havington. And he does a lot of party, and he's like, I think, introducing himself and saying like, I'm sorry, I know I have a bad reputation. She's like, no, it's just your way to compensate. Like she's like, I don't know any founder who can be successful without having a way of compensating. And so she says like others do, like you do drugs, others do golf or whatever. And I think you really should find your your way of also having like being able to shut off work, where it's not like you cannot think about work during this time. And in our case, it's very much the kids, and I do sports, but I think being with the kids really helps me also to having this like just going away from that, and then also going to work again with like with excitement and looking forward to it.
New energy.
Yeah. One of our team guys, like I think every 2 years or something, he takes 3 months off. He's our chief product actually, and he just climbed a new mountain in Nepal. Like nobody has been up there. Wow. And I know for 3 weeks he was just in a completely different world. And he came back and he's so inspired, not by reading a book, but just by having his mind shut off. And I think you have to find ways. Yeah. And it can be anything. If you like coffee, then do a like coffee course and it doesn't really matter what it is, but I think it really helps to have something on the side as well.
Yeah, I feel like people oftentimes undervalue how much rest contributes to productivity, and resting and stillness of the mind is contributing to productivity, and as you mentioned, can be in different ways.
And not just productivity, also creativity. Yeah. What I realize, if I'm only under stress, I have really bad ideas. I'm just functioning, and then sometimes like I go on a holiday, I'm like, why do I have such good ideas? And it's just because the mind is a little bit more chilled. Yeah.
Agreed. So let's get to the fun last segment of our episode, which is the rapid fire questions. Are you ready for it?
I am.
All right. So who's someone that inspires you?
My grandma inspires me a lot. She grew up in Germany during the war times, and she kind of fought her way through her life. She lost her husband early, and she had a sick child as a young mother. And she stayed, she's sometimes a little bit stubborn and stuff, but I think what I really admire about her is like she kept a very positive approach to life. And I think she enjoyed her life, although there was a lot of adversity, I think is what you call it.
Yeah, wonderful. On your LinkedIn, you mentioned you love doing movie nights with your family. So what's your favorite movie?
I studied acting. This is a very hard question.
Of course.
With the kids, I love all the Pixar movies. Like they're really good. I mean, the kids don't get the jokes always. They're really, really good for me. I love to watch the Sing movies. I don't know if you know them.
Sing movies. No,
it's like Sing #1 and #2. It's it's an audition. Sorry, I should just answer in one sentence, but I recommend. I really like Pixar movies. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. What's harder, being a mom or being a startup founder?
I feel there's more at stake as a mom, but it's not harder. It's a difficult question, but I like. Yeah, if the company fails, nobody dies, and if I'm not a good mom, there's more at stake, I think. Yeah.
How do you travel to work?
By bike.
Is it to your company's
it's a company
Urban
e-bike.
Connect?
Yeah. It's the fastest. If I don't have it, I'm much slower and much less motivated to get to work. No, it's really like I go everywhere with the bike. I love it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Judith, for sharing all these insights and all the information. It was wonderful speaking with you, and hope you also enjoyed talking.
I really did. Thank you, Ansuya.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.